Welcome everybody joining us this morning. I am Olga Atamanova, your anchor at the Ukraine Media Center at Ukraine Forum. The war is going on for 11 years. Today is day 841 since the Russian aggressor came into our territory. Today we zero in on the presentation of the book called Sirens of Hope, the MOAS Mission to Save Lives in Ukraine. In this presentation, we'll be talking about the evacuation of the injured soldiers and the situation in the Ukrainian Armed Forces medical branch. Today's speakers are Chris Catrambone, U.S. entrepreneur and the founder of MOAS. We have Igor Shekhtman with us, the director of MOAS, Dr. Inna Dymeter, the MOAS doctor, Yuri Sroka is the critical care specialist, Justin Marozzi is UK writer and the co-editor of this book. The co-editor of this book is also Iryna Savchuk joining us this morning. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, I would like to set off this presentation talking about how come you have found yourselves here and why your initiative has become a key instrument of evacuating Ukrainian soldiers from the battlefield. Chris, I would like to start with you. The floor is yours.
This is marking approximately 2.5 years since we've been active in Ukraine. We originally arrived about a month before the Russian advance, and we established our operations almost immediately. This is sort of the disruptive nature of MOAS is sort of not typical of I would say regular NGOs that respond to crises in a war. So this was something especially innovative in the sense that we were prepared when it happened, whereas that others weren't prepared. And it allowed us to advance very quickly and identify the gaps that were being left by the immediate advance, and that was providing such qualified doctors and paramedics immediately on the front line, and also having the assets available. So this is something that really set us apart and enabled us to be able to respond very quickly. MOAS had not done such a mission before. We actually started 10 years ago when we recognized that there was issues in the Mediterranean with saving lives at sea. And so that was our initial foray into the humanitarian sector. We ended up saving 40,000 people at sea over a period of 4 years. Right now here in Ukraine, after 2.5 years, we're very happy that we've saved 45,000 people, 45,000 soldiers, in fact, and we haven't lost a life yet. And that goes to our professionalism. Many people assume that MOAS is just another volunteer organization. It's not. We are paid professionals. Our doctors and paramedics are the best in this country. They have been the most experienced, I think, that we've recruited. We have over 150 doctors and paramedics and drivers that actually work on the front line in all 3 front areas. So this is something that I think sets us apart from the typical sort of response that an NGO would make. And so this is, can I answer your question?
Дякую, Крісе. Пане Ігорю, буду просити.
Igor, can I turn to you to focus on the additional issues of this specter of problems? My take on this is the current operation effected by MOAS is something the world has not yet seen. For one thing, the world hasn't seen a hostility of such a scope for over 80 years. The level of the medical support the MOAS is delivering to the Ukrainian soldiers. Unfortunately, it has come to a situation in Ukraine. However, the quality and the quantity of our specialists, we can only thank the founder, Christopher Catrambone, for his, shall I say, Ukrainian patriotism without a Ukrainian background. That's all I have to say. As a rule, what is the area of your operations, if that is something you can talk about? All we know is that you have more than 50 ambulances. Can you talk about the equipment that you have to rescue the lives of the Ukrainian combatants? The audience, of course, would be very much interested in what are the financial sources of your organization. Equipment is something that our doctors will be talking about. The areas, well, we cover all the front line from north to south. What is driving us? The first condition for us that we don't do fundraising within Ukraine. The finances come from the outside donors, mainly from the American donors. The situation after the 2 years of hostilities has become very difficult. People have grown tired, but for one or the other, in one way or the other, Chris is making sure that our expenses are covered. He has suggested that we are not a typical volunteer organizations. Our doctors are well paid, and we are paying them for their high professionalism. This is the front line that we do not see. It's not visible. This is the front of fundraising. You claim that you have saved more than 45,000 Ukrainian lives. Your mission is to transport a wounded person from the war area to provide stabilization medical service or other missions that you deliver. You transport the wounded to the government-run hospitals. How does it work? In NATO standards, that's called Row 1, and that is from the trench to the stabilization point, something that the Ukrainian medical personnel can do. No NGO, no volunteer organization are granted access to those areas. We collect the wounded at the stabilization points, more or less stabilized patients, what we call Row 2, and we transport them to the closest hospital where they can be treated or operated upon. But again, Inna will tell you in more detail. She's more versed in this. Now, in that case, Inna, can I turn to you? Let us talk about the equipment and the details of how the combat medicine is changing in your expertise. We have very well equipped resuscitation vans, and of course we thank Chris for that. We've got monitoring, we've got CPR machines, we can gauge different criteria. We have scanners where we can track down the level of bleeding or pneumothorax. Infusion mechanisms are very important, especially not to allow hypothermia. And we are also doing the triage. We also have portable meters of gamma globin to see the dynamics, because everyone knows that the death casualty sometimes is caused by the bleeding. We want to know whether there is a life-threatening bleeding. From the point of view as a intensive care specialists. How is Ukraine ready? How can we adapt to these new circumstances? And of course, how can we help the Ukrainian medical system? This country, as you will know, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Russia, it was going through the reform of the healthcare system, which is a job undone. It's a job in progress. Of course, we were not ready for such a level of traumas due to the combat activities. The organizations such as MOAS, since this is a not governmental organization, it is more flexible. We have access to the outside world facilities, technologies that can be taken advantage of at the battlefield, where the state cannot always offer relative services. Our medics, due to the help coming from the donors, receive both state-of-the-art equipment as well as state-of-the-art knowledge and expertise. These are the people open to learning. We learn from each other. This phase of evacuation is very important from the stabilization point where we are present, we are part of the team. This is very important to be part of the team working in line with Ukrainian doctors, sometimes 4 or 5 hour evacuation when the life person, what we call a life support, when you breathe for him or her, you help them to breathe, you monitor all the data and gauges, you can use the full spectrum of all the medicines that we have available due to the efforts of our sponsors. It gives us an opportunity to save the lives and to get the patient prepared for the operation. This is a very critical link. Justice, can I turn to you? We have heard the story of the doctors. For the book, I understand you've got a lot of histories, important histories, 45,000 lives saved. Now, how can we imagine or start to imagine the role of such a project for saving Ukrainian soldiers' lives? How did you feel the content? What were you driven by? What were you inspired by?
First of all, I'd like to say we're very honored to be able to launch the Ukrainian-language edition of Sirens of Hope today in Kyiv. That's important for us because this is a book that is a thoroughly Ukrainian venture. It was conceived in Ukraine, researched and written in Ukraine, designed, produced, printed, and paid for in Ukraine. So we're really delighted to be able to celebrate that launch of the Ukrainian-language edition. Yes, I think this is all about the medics. In one way, this was the easiest book I've ever had to write with my co-editor Iryna, because these are not our words. These are the words of medics like Yuri, of Dr. Inna, I'm sandwiched between 2 other MOAS figures here in Igor and Chris. So these are their stories, and they're very remarkable stories, but each one is very different, but they're united in the desire to do great work in Ukraine and to do the most important thing of all in any war, which is to save lives. So I think it was a very humbling project to do. I said it was easy on one level because these are other people's words, but at a different level it was a very difficult project, not least because of the very heartbreaking personal stories the medics have, understandably, the suffering they witness every day in their ambulances, the terrible injuries, the knowledge that day in, day out, they are seeing things that most of us in life do not have to see, and nor should they, but they have to do that because they are fighting this war on the medical front line. I just wanted to give one extract, if I may, Olga, from one of our nurses who's not here with us today. Her name is Natalia. A lot of the medics, like Yuri and Inna, are not speaking to the patients if they're intubated and unconscious. Those are the most critically injured soldiers, and those are the greatest numbers of casualties that MOAS is carrying. But sometimes they also carry walking wounded who are able to speak to them. And I think I found that these some were the most heartrending stories. So these are the words from one of our nurses called Natalia. And she had a soldier in her ambulance who had just lost both legs and one arm. The hardest thing was to see the look on his face. I saw he'd lost all interest in his life and that his life was over. There was nothing left for him. We talked to them. We try to keep them positive. We tell them there's great care available, it's free for veterans, there are lots of volunteers who will assist them with prosthetics, and life won't be over. Lots of that sort of reassurance and encouragement. But I can't forget the look in his eyes. A light had gone out. So these are very moving stories, and we've put them together, first-person voice. I think it's been beautifully produced, and I think it's a tribute both to the medics of Ukraine, to Chris and Gary for their leadership in this very remarkable operation. And just a final point, if I may, from another international perspective, what MOAS does is exceptional. Red Cross, Médecins Sans Frontières, you might expect them to be doing the work that MOAS is doing in Ukraine. The short answer is they're not doing that work, but MOAS is shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainian armed forces and doing work that most NGOs are simply not able or not willing to do. So I think it's a remarkable organization, and I hope the book reflects that in its pages.
Дякую вам. Це дійсно біль.
Thank you very much. This is the pain that we are destined to live day in and day out. The casualty that we see daily on this war. Of course, we appreciate your effort to systemize and put together the data for us to remember in the eternity for the next generations to understand what we are confronting here in Ukraine. Chris, can I, or Justice, who is the target audience? Where can we buy it, or we see it virtually or otherwise? I have seen that the book is full of photos. Who's been working on those photos? Because they are an impressive stuff.
I think the first thing I would say is that it was never intended to be a book for sale. We wanted to do it for a number of reasons. I think for a gift to MOAS donors on both sides of the Atlantic, gift for supporters of MOAS in either the English language or the Ukrainian language editions. We're always able to print more copies. We dispatched, I think, an excellent photographer who came back with fabulous black and white portraits of all the medics to show the work, the daily reality of the sort of work that MOAS does. I also remember when he came back, I thought the one thing that was missing from his reportage was some of the more unpleasant aspects of the medics' work, and I said, I think we need some more sort of real imagery of that reflects the life and death struggles that the war is producing. And I almost immediately regretted that remark, I think, because Gary and Chris bombarded me with images that many of which we simply couldn't use. They're far too graphic. So we've had to try to strike a balance between what is acceptable to modern readers, honoring the medics and the soldiers who've been terribly wounded, but obviously not including images that are just too strong. So I don't know if Iryna would like to add some words, who work with me very closely. We travel thousands of miles, sometimes together, sometimes separately, to speak to the medics.
Ірино, розкажіть нам, будь ласка.
Дякую. Джастін вже зробив гарну роботу.
As Justice has done a wonderful work in presenting this book. But my point is that this story is ongoing. MOAS is keeping its work. We've been working since the very beginning of the full-scale invasion. The stories that we have will never be, we will never be able to put them between two covers. It's good that we see journalists here in the audience. We have got very many stories to share with different media, with different audiences. Find out your own. Come to the east of this country. We'll see our work firsthand. I think this is a very important thing to share with the rest of the world. about this war and about the medical front. We've got a short video that I suggest we have a look at.
Шановні колеги, гості.
Dear colleagues and guests, if there are questions, comments, please join in. Welcome, Nadia Yurchenko from Ukrinform media outlet. Two questions in terms of clarification. One clarification, not the status per se, but the special character of your NGO. How do you interact with the Ukrainian authorities? How do you select doctors for your mission? How do you interact with the Ukrainian military command? How do you select a place where you work? What you have informed us about is something fantastic, but to be honest with you, this is the first time I have heard about your mission for the first time in my life. A question about the promotion of this book. Perhaps you plan to have this book translated into other languages for people to know about your mission and help Ukraine and the Ukrainian paramedics to save lives here. I will try to answer your first question. As a body, MOAS has a memorandum on interaction with the Ministry of Healthcare of Ukraine, Ministry of Defense, and the Command of Medical Forces of Ukraine, and with some units of the Special Operation Forces. That is to say, we are doing a 1% legal activities. We are all accredited by the Ministry of Healthcare, and of course, we cooperate with the command of the medical service. In what volume, in where, it's not for me to tell you. Now, how do we get to the places where we work? As the war started, Ukrainian medics were afraid to go. It was a territory Ukrainian medics wouldn't go. I mentioned we would go to Slavyansk, and the answer was it's a big no-no. When our first mission went to Mykolaiv, and Mykolaiv was pummeled by bombs, it was for 6 days that we didn't leave the shelters. Now the situation seems to be better now. Now, as for the men and women, according to the mobilization law, it has become quite a difficult situation. As an organization, we don't have the exemption rights for our personnel. This is a work in progress. We don't know where we will end up. But there is a very good percentage of the possibility that our specialists will be called up. We are working with the Ministry of Economic Development and other ministries. I believe that we will be successful in our endeavor, but this is a big question. This is the answer to question one. Justice. How about the promotion of the book abroad?
I think I'm going to say we've saved the best to last. We began with an event in London with the English language edition. We did something similar in New York, and both of those events were a combination of raising awareness, some work with the media. Dr. Yuri came to the UK as part of a wider tour of the UK with Ukrainian medics. We had a destroyed we did something in a similar event in New York at the Ukrainian Institute of America, which was very successful. So we are taking the book around the world. But we also felt that this is a Ukrainian project, and there is no more important place to talk about this than in Ukraine. So we've done US, UK, and Ukraine. I wouldn't dream of asking Chris to start thinking about putting this into a Spanish language or something else. I think we're probably covered with the English language and Ukrainian language. Chris.
Дякую, друзі. Чи маєте ще питання, чи коментарі? Ми дійсно...
Thank you, sir. Indeed, MOAS organization is something that we haven't heard before a lot. Having said that, I appreciate the scope, the quality, which is so impressive. Perhaps you are short of time to talk about your work, but you are more than welcome. We'll be welcoming you here. We are waiting for you here. These are very important for us to highlight for the Ukrainian people, for the peoples all around the world to know about your project and to be inspired by your deeds. Thank you for your work. I hope there will be a lot of saved lives. And in advance, we extend sincere thanks to you. Hopefully, the world will see this book. The world will see these horrors that the Ukrainians are confronting. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We will continue our work for the sake of our victory. Glory to Ukraine.
Да. Ну, звук, да, камери. Один.